Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast for the intelligent spouse.
I'm Dr. Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Dr. Scott Hastings.
We are two doctors, two researchers, two spouses, two lovers, and two incredibly different human beings coming together for one purpose: to transform the stinky parts of your marriage into scintillating ones, using intelligence mixed with a little fun. Hello, lovers. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Marriage IQ.
You know it.
How was your week, babe?
My week?
Yeah.
It's been fantastic.
What's been so great about it?
I'm with you. I've been working with you here. That's what makes it fantastic.
That makes mine fantastic, too. We've had a great week. Lots of highlights, lots of sad things, and a lot of time together.
We want to share it with you.
We want to get real with you today, folks.
Let's get real.
You know, we've been thinking, and we've come to the realization that marriage isn't just about learning how to live with somebody else. It's also about learning who you are, while at the same time growing along someone else who's doing exactly the same thing. That's not always easy, is it?
It's never easy, right? Anything that's worth it.
We don't just figure out during our teenage years one time who we are and then call it good for the rest of our lives.
That's a bummer.
Research, like we've talked about from Eric Erickson and Robert Keegan and others, shows that identity is something that we revisit throughout our lives over and over again, and especially during transitions. Some of the biggest transitions where we may have to reestablish our identity include when we get married, when we become a parent, when we change our careers, when we lose somebody really close to us that we love, when we're betrayed by a spouse, or even sometimes watching our kids leave from home. Each time we're faced with a new question: who am I? Who am I now? What matters most to me? What do I want to hold on to? And what no longer works? What no longer fits with who I am? And here's where this gets a little bit tricky in marriage. You're not just growing as an individual, you're growing as part of a couple. You go from being an I or a me to being a we. And that means you have to balance two really powerful needs. First, becoming who you truly are, which is changing throughout your lifespan, but also staying emotionally connected and intimate with your spouse. When we go through life not being intentional and not having insight, as we're trying to figure out who we are, we can really mess things up.
Listen to Marriage IQ.
When one or both spouses feel like they're outgrowing the relationship or that they can't fully be authentic and be themselves, it can lead to loneliness, resentment, or emotional disconnection. On the other hand, couples who allow space for both personal growth and deep connection report more satisfaction, better mental health, and deeper intimacy over time. So how do we stay me and we at the same time? Well, this is where something called differentiation of self comes in. It's the ability to hold on to who you are, your values, your beliefs, your sense of self, while at the same time staying close and emotionally available to someone else. This is really essential to having a good marriage. And how we navigate this balance can shape everything from how we communicate to how we experience intimacy in the bedroom. In this episode today, we're going to explore why identity shifts happen in marriage and why that's normal. Because here's really the truth. Your identity will evolve. So will your marriage. It's meant to be that way. The couples who thrive are the ones who stay curious, stay open, and keep choosing to grow together.
Here on Marriage IQ, we talk a lot about our own identity. Who am I? Who are we? If only we could uncover our own identity and be able to define it clearly and know who we are. then we'll have a lifetime filled with meaning and purpose, right? We finally found ourselves. But wait, life isn't like that. We might find ourselves in one part of life and discover that in other parts of our lives, we don't really know who we are.
Yeah, our identity is complex with lots of different parts.
We may long for the good old days when we knew who we were and were comfortable in our own skin. Our sense of self changes, though, over seasons and years of living. But Dr. Hastings, I thought that we're supposed to find our own true identity, right? That's one of your four cornerstones. That's true. If our identity is shifting over time, how on earth are we ever able to exactly know who we truly are?
That's part of the fun.
Great question. I wish I knew the full answer that was very fast and easy for you. To explain this phenomenon of trying to confidently know who we are in the midst of a tumultuous life of not knowing who we are and lots of changes, I like to quote from one of my favorite movies, The Sound of Music.
That's your very favorite movie.
Now, some of you might ask, wait, I thought you liked Star Wars. How do Star Wars and Sound of Music, how can you like them both? Well, I am a very strange duck.
Hello.
I like lots of things that are very different from each other.
A lot of pop culture.
So, The Sound of Music, the nuns are singing. They're asking the same thing about Maria, a nun who doesn't seem to quite fit in. How do you solve a problem like Maria? How do you catch a cloud and pin it down? How do you keep a wave upon the sand? Well, just like Maria, she might be crazy and I might be crazy too. Was she crazy or was she just having an identity shift?
You know, in the 100 times we've watched The Sound of Music, I don't think I've ever thought of her as having an identity crisis or an identity shift. That's really brilliant of you.
Welcome to my brain.
Ooh, there's the thunder and lightning, just like on The Sound of Music.
What points of life have identity shifts? It might happen naturally or be thrust upon us. Are we ready? Heidi talked about some earlier. Marriage, children, parenthood. Are we ready? And there's some main shifts that happen throughout a life that we came across and we thought of. The first, well, there's a lot, but some of the big ones, teenager, adolescence, which is a big one. We all go through that. We're not going to talk about this on this marriage podcast, but that's a big one.
So when you ask, are you ready for that? What do you mean? And how do we know if we're ready for something like that?
We don't. We live through it. I think, though, being intentional and knowing what's coming up around the bend, we can start planning for things.
When some of those transitions that are quite normative.
I think with the teenage thing, I don't think we want to talk a whole lot on it, but I just remember just feeling so awkward about all these changes and nobody really talked to me about it. I mean, they sort of did, you know, I don't think my parents were any different than most parents.
Yeah, I remember in our last episode, I think it was with Shara Jackson Harper, she talked about couples when they get ready to have a baby. They are talking about names for the baby. They're talking about what color the room is going to be, clothes that they're buying, but they don't talk at all about how to prepare themselves for this very, very difficult identity transformation.
Right. And that actually is, according to research anyway, that's the biggest identity shift of your life is becoming a parent.
I think also when we get married, it's all about the wedding. It's all about the excitement of it. And with a couple of our kids, we've had them, they were happy, they were in love.
Yeah.
But nobody told them this is going to really change your identity as well. They weren't understanding that. We didn't talk to them enough about that, I don't think. We talked to them a lot about marriage, but not that they might struggle with remembering who they were.
I missed the manual on that one.
Yeah. We've thought about it a lot this week, though.
There's a study we kept coming across by Soulsby in 2015 on what marriage does to your identity. Moving from the me to we, like Heidi was saying in the beginning, considering all these pressures, there's external family pressures. We become accountable to a spouse. We become one, but how do I define how to become one with my spouse and still maintain autonomy, to be individual, to be my own identity?
Keep my own preferences and desires and hobbies and
Right. The things that are important to you, your values.
maybe even some friends.
Some of the traits that they found in this study, just some openness to change. That was really key. Being open to change.
So let me see if I've got you right. Those who navigate that transition into marriage better, when you're saying key traits, that's what you're meaning.
Right. Yeah.
They inherently are more open to change.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Just openness to change as a identity. Also, identity flexibility, meaning you have your definition of who you think you are, and it's open to change, to be flexible, to be different. And also, they found those people who were intentional about discussing roles and their expectations played a part. And instead of being surprised, they talked about these roles.
We have a marriage IQ episode on expectations and how we can talk about those. I think that is really important.
Yes, the leaf blower incident.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we'll say. You'll have to go back and listen to it.
Parable of the leaf blower.
Getting back to the biggest shift, becoming a parent. There's a lot of things to think about. The navigating a new person in your home. We have a thunderstorm outside. Making room for this new person.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another part of life that some colloquially call the midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
This happened to me at some point in the past. But I was surprised when I looked into this. Only about 10 to 20% of adults undergo a truly deeply troubling midlife crisis, according to the National Survey of Midlife in the United States.
Didn't know there was such a survey.
Yeah, I didn't know this either, but only 10 to 20. So I guess everyone else has it figured out except for me. But it was very real and very raw.
Were you asking yourself those same questions that we talked about earlier? Like,
Well,
who
just-
am I? What do I
Yeah,
like? What do I
Like,
keep?
who am I? You go 40 plus years and you think you know who you are. And now things are changing and priorities are changing with jobs, with families, with relationships, with other people, with who I feel I think I am. It was tough. And for me, a lot of it was faith-based. And fortunately, I was able to climb out through the other side and maintain a faith in God. And it's actually far, far better than it was before. So I'm really grateful, very grateful for that time of enormous turmoil mentally. Nobody could see it. Not something you can see. It's just inside your head.
Right.
So some other life changes, empty nesterhood.
Mm-hmm. We kind of scooted past that one without too much going on, turmoil-wise, because I was in school and we made some adjustments very quickly when I realized how hard you were taking it. Maybe it took a month or so. And we were just really, really intentional about putting in time together. I think that's when we started our ballroom dance class
Yep.
every week. And
We were intentional about our empty nesting. We knew it was coming up, and it was hard on me for about a month. And then I started thinking, dang,
this is an opportunity.
I kind of like this.
Another big one that has caused us, or at least me, I don't know about you, but me, some identity shifts is when we've lived in a certain place for a decade or so, and then we move to somewhere very, very different. without family support.
Moving is huge.
I would say
That's a
at
big
least
one.
3 of our big moves
It's very
have
traumatic.
been so hard on me, really having to reframe who I am because so much of who I thought I was based in a job or in the community I lived in or my family, my extended family. So those really can cause us to have to ask ourselves, who am I? Who do I want to be?
Nothing like a
important.
move to really
Shake
recreate who you are.
shake things up. Yeah.
Some other things that might come up for you: medical diagnosis, cancer, trauma,
Hmm.
motor vehicle accident, divorce.
Yeah, that is a big one. That's a really big one, actually,
That's very traumatic.
because you were a we, especially if you were more enmeshed we and you didn't pay attention to who you personally were. That can cause just really a lot of difficulty.
So, a death of a loved one,
A spouse.
spouse, job loss, loss or change of your religious faith,
Hmm.
or even for scientists, we're not going to leave them out. A scientific revolution
Mm.
that's totally different. Newtonian physics does not match directly with Einsteinian physics. And that required a huge scientific revolution.
And a paradigm shift in some identities, most likely.
Right. Yes. Things that we thought happened the way they do in the universe are actually not the way they happen. And that can be very unnerving. This brings up a point, Heidi. We talk about these changes and shifts, and I think it's part of human nature to want to push back, against these changes. And I just want peace.
Right.
I want tranquility.
I want to go back where I was.
I want safety,
Stability.
routine, sameness.
Mm-hmm.
I want to stay in the same job despite no growth. I want to stay in this stinky marriage because we're not willing to rock the boat. On the flip side, you think about religion over the course of thousands of years, and I'm going to use the Western Christianity, Catholicism for 2,000 years. That was a symbol of stability. If you think your life is hard, try living a day in the Middle Ages.
Right.
I think the average age was 40
Of
when they died.
lifespan. Yeah.
Lifespan. It was just completely miserable compared to our standards. They had that religion to hold on to, the sameness. And I don't think that's bad. I think there's a lot of good to wanting to eat our comfort food and wear our sweats and watch our favorite movie from 20 years ago. I don't think there's anything wrong with that once in a while, but I think it's important to recognize what we're doing. We're wanting to push back against all these changes. Heidi, do you agree with me or not on people craving these comfort foods, comfort activities, things that require no taking chances or changing?
Yeah, risk is really, really hard. Risk is very hard.
So you think that is kind of part of the human nature?
Sometimes, yeah.
To
Yes.
hold on to things that don't seem to move because everything else is.
Because at least it's something that you know. And for whatever reason, we definitely have a difficult time moving into unknown territory.
Okay.
It might be harder. It might be worse.
So do you think that there are some differences between genders?
Well, I think men tend to be bigger risk takers than women. I think women probably, that's my guess from women I know, from women I talk to.
Okay.
They definitely prefer security.
Safety, security.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have an answer why.
Okay, tell me.
Women like safety and security because women are changing every day, at least according to Shara Jackson.
Yeah.
You're not the same every day because of these hormone cycles.
Yeah.
I think the Scott Hastings theory of gender differences in identity shifts are that it's more difficult for women to form an individual identity than it is for men. Controversial.
Well,
Dr.
so you
Hastings.
think that's because of DNA mostly?
Well, I don't know. Is it because of DNA?
I think part of it is how we're socialized also to give up part of our identity
That's another one. You're socialized
to take your last name, that you're bigger than me, so you're going to be my protector. All things point to relying on the man and maybe giving up parts of who I am to do so. And some of those have been around for a long time. Some of them are more or less modern. And I think some of that's changing. There's not as much of that now, but
Well,
still,
yeah.
I mean, socialization, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it is how it is. And that may set up part of the
We could talk
situation
for
here.
hours on socialization. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, you can take pro or con on that. But really getting back to biology and hormones, that is a thing, right? Women do tend to have much more ups and downs with changes in hormones every month than men.
I find it fascinating that you're seeing it through the lens of science and I'm seeing it through the lens of social science.
Okay. Let's come together.
When that's your field, this is my field, and we might both be right.
And I think that women do tend to externalize a lot more as far as what they believe and think.
You mean relying on other people to help them
groups.
to form their opinion?
Groups of friends, groups of social status people.
Yeah.
They do tend to take in more of what other people think rather than to individualize their own identity. Again,
yes,
you can throw tomatoes at me, but I think, is this not true?
Well, I think it's true for both men and women, though, because I think men form their opinions about politics or about things going on in the world or about the market or whatever by listening to experts, which is still looking to others to form your opinions. I think as women, yes, we do that. But some of those who are more influential, gatekeepers maybe for us, are those closest to us.
Okay. I agree.
And I guess even social media would be a big influencer of opinions for both men and women.
I think Jordan Peterson said it very well in his book, 12 Rules for Life. He talked about order and chaos. And men represent order, women represent chaos.
Well, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that. You better explain that a little bit more.
Is it chaotic if you have to deal with shifting hormones every single day of your life?
Yep. Can be.
I'd say that's a little chaotic. But you go back to the yin and the yang. I love this thing. It's the exact same. There's no one's above the other. You have the same power, but you're so different. And I am evidently drawn to your chaotic way of life.
Is there a better way to name it than chaos?
Well, I kind of like the word chaos, quite frankly. It's kind of like that spaghetti splattered against the wall back in the women's sexual capacity episode.
Well, let's think about it. How about beauty?
It's not. It's not that I have anything against women.
Could it be beauty instead of chaos?
It could be.
Could it
be
variety? Could it
creativity?
Be creativity. I like those words maybe a little better than chaos because chaos has a negative connotation.
Okay. You're right.
Hey, everyone. Did you just hear that? He said you're right.
So back to identity shifts.
Yeah.
We're getting away from the gender differences. It requires a certain amount of vulnerability.
When we're going through an identity shift?
When we come up against this.
How does it require this? What do you mean?
Vulnerability. Okay, I have an example. Very tragically, our neighbor was killed. He's a young guy last month. And we were really good friends with him, with his wife. We did go to his funeral last night. And it was very touching because we saw in real time a very, very vulnerable moment in his wife's life.
Hmm.
She was scared. She was emotional, sad,
Devastated.
all these all these emotions, and it was in real time. And we got to share that with her. And that is a very special moment for us to be able to see that level of vulnerability.
To witness.
Yeah, it's special. And let's think about it because I like to think in symbols here. Why do people like sunrises and sunsets so much?
Besides that, they're so beautiful.
But what makes them beautiful? When people are asked, there's studies, I looked this up, the favorite time of the day. What's your best time of the day? It's not at noon. It's not in the afternoon. It's when the sun is rising and the sun is setting. The most favorite time of the day. Same thing with seasons, fall and spring. Not the summer, not the winter. These are changes in time. Anytime you have change, you have vulnerability.
Hmm.
You become vulnerable. The sun is vulnerable. It's setting. It's not blazing hot
Hmm.
or it's coming up. And in that change, in that vulnerable moment of either the day or the season, is when that beauty arises. That's what happens with identity shifts during life. They can become incredibly beautiful, like a sunrise, like a sunset, like a walk in the fall leaves. Who doesn't like fall? I think that's pretty much people's favorite season.
That's actually pretty brilliant
Thank
to
you.
tie the seasons of the year to seasons of life and how change and vulnerability equal beauty.
I've waited a while for you to say that to me. So
That you're brilliant.
I'm so glad I'm brilliant
You
today.
are.
Thank you.
Yep. And handsome. So, an identity shift, Scott, and our listeners, at its core, can feel like both an unraveling and a rebuilding. And maybe that's what makes it kind of vulnerable. It's not just like changing a hairstyle or changing a job title or changing the kind of clothes that we wear. It's deep and it's personal and it's sometimes really disorienting. It's a reintroduction to ourselves. It could be in an instant or it could be growing over time, but where we no longer recognize the person in the mirror. We're not quite sure who we used to be, but we're not sure who we're becoming either. This is what happened to me after finishing my grad school. It was so hard just to look in the mirror and say, I have no idea who I was. I knew who I was as a student. I knew who I was as a mom. This is the first time there's no expected role of me. I have to create who I am. And it was grief in that space. And for someone who's lost a loved one, like our neighbor, that's grief. Sometimes for a young parent who's lost their flexibility with life, their zest for life, their ability to say yes to everything, that can be grief, that freedom, that can be grief, even though there are happy things ahead. It's grief for the version of you that once felt certain and confident and defined. Some days it kind of feels like we're peeling off layers that once felt like skin. Some of those include old roles, old beliefs, old ways of being, and we realize those don't fit anymore. Shedding them stings. And I've had multiple times of life where that's been the case, where I thought that things were going to be a certain way and they ended up not being that way at all. And it really hurt. But at that same time, there's a flicker, a hope, maybe even relief. Something like breathing deeper for the first time in months. You start making different choices, speaking with a voice that surprises even you. It's unfamiliar, but it's honest. And you begin noticing what resonates and what doesn't. You say no more often. You say yes less. But when you do, you really are not doing it out of duty, but because you really want to. And slowly, identity shift feels like you're walking through fog and you're not finding the old path again. You've been searching and searching for that, but you have the courage to make your own new path, one that fits who you are now. And it's lonely sometimes, but it's also very sacred, in my opinion. I saw this growth, this transition in all the women in my research. It took something really, really difficult for them feeling like they were dead for a while and start moving forward again. It's the moment that you stop performing to please others and you start becoming who you were meant to be. That's a joyful thing. And in terms of marriage, let's face it, marriage isn't just built on love, just like the seasons you were talking about, Scott. It's built on seasons of stress, seasons of identity shifts, sometimes painful wake up calls, those sunrises, those sunsets. But here's the truth: your relationship isn't broken because you're struggling. Your marriage relationship is not broken because you're struggling. In fact, those struggles may be the very thing that grows you closer to each other if you let
What?
them.
How's that possible?
I want to go back to that study again that you talked about by Soulsby and Bennett on the me versus we identities in marriage. And I think the big thing about that study that I really liked is there really aren't a lot of other studies who look at that within marriage of that identity shift. But I loved a quote of one of the participants in the study. I don't think there was a name with the person, but they said, being married is molding the person that I am and who I'm becoming. It's helping me fulfill dreams and ambitions and goals. It's giving me deeper love, a sense of achievement, and a sense of encouragement.
I
And,
like that person.
and that doesn't mean it's easy, right?
That is absolutely right. But I would like to be friends with that person.
Yeah, they really see that through all the good, all the bad, it's this meaningful life with this other person that we love so much that we grow together. So, one of my favorite relationship experts, Dr. David Schnarch, calls marriage the best lab for building emotional and mental maturity. All that we're talking about here with these identity shifts, with self differentiation, with looking at who we are and being aware of ourselves and not giving up when things get hard, but just pushing through, asking those questions, finding ourselves. All of those help us become more emotionally mature, more mentally mature, often more spiritually mature. Why? Because it does force us to wrestle with who we are while still staying connected to our spouse who's also growing and changing and trying to figure out who they are. I think that's one big reason why it's really hard to hear somebody say, well, you always did this and you always said that. And in my experience, you did this. And remember when you did that? Because by using that kind of language, we're not honoring that we're growing and changing
Yeah.
and that we're being different.
No bueno. See, I'm learning more Spanish.
Yeah.
I'm getting there. It's happening. Even couples who once felt totally in sync suddenly find themselves asking, who am I now? Who are we now as a couple? And these transitions are very normal. They're necessary. Researchers found that couples go through at least 3 major identity shifts across a lifetime.
Yeah. So that one
One of
is
them being parenthood.
parenthood and marriage and empty nester period or something.
Well, midlife crisis.
Midlife. Yeah.
You put it in there.
Yeah.
Death.
I think there are a lot
Job
more
loss.
than that. I would guess probably 7 to 10 during the
Okay.
marriage period.
So as we grow, we're constantly renegotiating who we are as a couple. It's constantly moving and changing.
Yeah.
At the beginning of a relationship, it's all fire and fusion. You're together constantly, and emotional connection is very high. But over time, that emotional togetherness gives way to real individuality. And how well you both adapt determines how well you do long term. Couples who learn to honor each other's growth while staying emotionally connected and also true to themselves tend to be more resilient during high stress seasons. Back to these shifts, even midlife, when children leave and roles shift and some couples feel adrift, it's possible to rediscover your sense of self and your bond with your spouse. The discomfort can actually become a catalyst when we stop avoiding, numbing, or blaming and start working on who we are emotionally and mentally. We can build a deeper intimacy that we've ever had than in the honeymoon phase.
So if you're in a tough spot where you're feeling stuck, distant, or uncertain, don't give up. You might just be in one of those life crucibles that leads to a brand new version of you. Do you know what crucible means as compared to crisis?
That is where the real change happens.
Yeah, a crucible is heat, major heat that changes and refines into gold, that
That
changes and increases your value, increases your sense of self, leads to a brand new version of you and of your marriage too.
So, what can you do this week, folks? What identity shifts have you gone through? What parts have you held on to of yourself, your old identity? That's okay. What parts have you let go? What new parts have you found and adopted into your identity and your individually as well as in your marriage? Think about it. That's your homework this week.
That sounds like great homework. Well, everybody, that wraps up this episode of Marriage IQ.
And remember, the intelligent spouse knows that to change from a stinky to a scintillating marriage first requires a change in themselves.
We hope that you'll stay connected with us by following us on marriageiq.com and on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also go to marriageiq.com and sign up for our weekly tips email.
Invite your family and friends to join the Marriage IQ community. Keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time on another exciting episode of Marriage IQ.